The Mustang Wheel.
Hello everyone, I'm here with my expert videographer, Ms. McCready, to visit Bari, which is on West Grand Avenue. It is one of the greatest small businesses selling Italian specialties. So we're going to go on inside and show you some of the great things that you can find here. Just want to show you a few things that are typical of Italian cuisine. Let's start, of course, with olive oil. In the ancient world, and of course still today, Italy is a massive producer of olives and olive oil. So we have lots and lots and lots of varieties here of olive oil from which you can choose. Pezzano, Colloquium, different varieties and brands, all sorts of prices as well. So that's your olive oil. Some come in bottles, some even come in metal tins, as you can see down below. And of course, everyone's favorite, pasta. And what is really amazing about Italian pasta, you may not know this, there are some 350 different shapes of pasta. And if you include all the different regional names for them, there are over 1,000. So let's take a look at just some of the pastas that you can see here at Bari. Now these are dried pastas. We're going to be making pasta from scratch, fresh pasta, but you can always get the dried pasta, and you can just get a sense, if Ms. McCready can show you here, of all these different shapes of pasta. Penne pasta, which look like little feathers, of course, that you see. And if we keep going down, others that you might recognize, rigatoni, these radiatori, which look like little radiators. And as we go, you will see things like farfalle, which means little bow ties, and things with which you're very, very familiar, I'm sure. Linguine, fettuccine, and so forth. But it's an endless variety of different shapes of pasta. So the other thing we want to think about with respect to Italian cooking are cheeses, right? Those of you who study French, of course, think cheese all the time. Brie and camembert and all of the French cheeses, and of course Swiss cheeses like Gruyere and Swiss and so forth. But we have to remember the Italian cheeses because they're pretty amazing too, right? We have cheeses like mozzarella and Parmigiano Reggiano, and the one that we're going to be using, right, I'll show it here to you as well, is Pecorino Romano cheese. A little more about Pecorino, but that's the one we're going to use in our dish. But you can see them here in the case. Pecorino Romano. It is a cheese made from sheep milk, from the ewe. Buonasera a tutti! Welcome to Casa Nifong. I'm Mr. Nifong, as many of you know, and I am delighted to welcome you to my home and the home of my husband Colin, and for some pasta making tonight. As you can see, I'm wearing a hat from Bari. We stopped there earlier in our trip together. A local Italian grocery store where you can find the wonderful pastas and olive oils and cheeses and all of the other things that you want to make these fine cuisines. Bari, of course, some of you may know, is a city in southern Italy in the Apulia region. I think we have a little graphic to show you exactly where Apulia is. So, tonight we're going to be making pasta from scratch. But of course, as you know, you don't have to make it from scratch. You can buy pasta at Bari, many other places in the Italian neighborhoods, or even in your local grocery store, Jewel at Trader Joe's. It comes in such a wide variety of shapes and sizes. As you recall my saying, there are now over 350 different pastas, and if you include all of the different regional names for the different shapes of pasta, you're well over 1,000. It's amazing. Here we have a little farfalle or bow tie pasta that is made with colors, some squid ink and other vegetable colors to make it bright and colorful. Some macaroni shape for you as well. What we're going to be making tonight is a little bit like a linguine. So I will show you some dried linguine. You don't have to buy this brand, but we do have an example here of, actually these are fettuccine and bucatini. Very similar, right? Your long pasta similar to spaghetti. And what's fascinating about these two is that they are often numbered based on the width and size of the pasta itself. So this fettuccine is called number 3. And here we have a bucatini number 14. So what do we need if we're going to make pasta from scratch? It's really, really simple, right? All you have to remember, 3 ingredients, 100 grams of each. 3 ingredients, 100 grams of each. So we start with our semolina. Semolina. It comes in a little bag like this, easy to find in your local store, and we're going to measure out 100 grams of that. Then some all-purpose flour, again, 100 grams. Super easy. And then, this was news to me when I learned it, we're going to do 100 grams of egg. How many grams is that? Well, as it turns out, 2 eggs are almost 100 grams. And in fact, when I measured out my 2 eggs, they came to exactly 100 grams. So about 50 grams for each egg. I use a little scale that looks like this, and it's just like your experiments in science class, in your labs. Take your bowl, whatever it is, and you put it on the scale and you hit the tare function, right? You're all familiar with that. And it subtracts, eliminates the weight of the bowl, and then you can just add in. If you don't have a scale that switches from the English system of ounces to the metric system of grams, you can always convert the 100 grams to ounces. Not that hard. I know you can do it. So we have our eggs, we have our flour, we have our semolina, and let's get started. So we're ready to get started making your first pasta. All right, so I have my semolina. I'm going to dump that into a mixing bowl. Any one will do. So putting our 100 grams of semolina. Now I should mention that you can actually make pasta using only flour, so you could even eliminate that one ingredient of the semolina. Colin and I like to use some semolina because it's a little coarser and it gives the pasta a little more of a bite. So when you're chewing it, a little more texture. So, and then I have my 100 grams of flour. I'm going to mix that in right here with the semolina. There we are. And now for my 100 grams of egg, which I mentioned came out to, 2 eggs came out to exactly 100 grams. And if you are able, do try to get your cage-free eggs to be friendly to our friends, the chickens. All right, I'm dumping the eggs into my bowl. Set that aside. And so now that I have all my ingredients in my bowl, I'm using my Danish whisk to mix everything up. Our goal is to get the flour and the semolina as hydrated as we possibly can. So we're just going to keep stirring as we go. And as I do this, I should mention that in the neighborhood of Bari on West Grand Avenue, in the 1100-1200 block of West Grand Avenue, there are a number of wonderful Italian stores, bakeries, and restaurants, including the famous D'Amato's, which is a great little bakery that you might want to try out sometime. And there is also Salerno's, which is a fun pizza restaurant. I'm just going to keep working my flour and my semolina with my egg, with my Danish whisk, until I try to get it as consistent as I possibly can before I dump it out and begin to work it with my hands. Doesn't really take very long. In fact, this whole preparation, making your own pasta from scratch, boiling the pasta and then making the sauce that we're going to make today with Cacio e Pepe, which is in Italian cheese and pepper. So we're going to make our pasta and then we are going to coat it with a wonderful pecorino romano cheese and cracked pepper, which is why we really only have about 6 ingredients for this entire effort. All right, I'm almost there. So I'm going to take the dough and pour it out onto my wooden board after I work it a little bit with my hands first. All right, just to knead it together a little bit. All right, I'll set aside my Danish whisk and begin in my bowl to work it together with my hands. Just trying to get the dough sticking together a little bit now that the flour and the semolina are hydrated by the egg, which will bind it together. So, kneading it as we go. It's actually kind of fun to get one's hands in the dough and begin working it together. And as I said, if you ever want to start from scratch and make your own pasta dough and the Cacio e Pepe, about an hour and a half from start to finish. If you use dried pasta that you've bought at the store, you can probably do it in less than half an hour. So I'm just continuing to knead my pasta dough. You can see it's almost all together now. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pour it out on my wooden board. Now, as my instructions indicated, and I believe we're going to share all of those with you at some point, the little list of ingredients and supplies that you need to carry this out. We tend to like a wooden board because once we start rolling the dough in a little bit later, the wooden board sort of has a bit of teeth. And so when you're rolling your dough out, it tends to, when you're trying to spread it out, it stays without sort of clinging back together. So I'm going to continue working my dough here, right? Trying to get all of the flour and all of the bits put together into a nice, even consistency. And once I've done that for about 5-10 minutes, right? Once I've done that with the heel of my hand, right? Continuing to work my dough. Once I've made it into a consistent little loaf, I'm going to cover it and let it rest for about 30 minutes. If I'm going to use it right away, which I am today, I let it rest under a bowl. I can just go back and get one of my bowls that I used before, cover it on the wooden board and let it rest for 30 minutes. If you want to make your dough in advance and you're not going to cook the pasta until the next day, right? You want to make sure that Abby has an opinion. You want to make sure that you cover the dough in a bowl with some cellophane or plastic wrap and put it in the fridge overnight, and then you'll be all set. So I'm going to continue working my dough with the heel of my hand. Then we're going to let it rest for 30 minutes, and then I'll be back. And welcome back. I hope you all were hard at work at home while our dough was resting for the last half hour or more. And while that was happening, I was hard at work grating our ingredients, the pecorino romano, for our sauce, for the Cacio e Pepe. Now, of course, when you make pasta or when you buy pasta and prepare it, you may use any sauce that you want. But Cacio e Pepe, cheese and pepper, is a traditional Roman dish. And so, since I'm the Latin teacher, Rome is pretty special. I should mention, and I'm sure that my students watching this have been saying all along, but Magister, the Romans did not have pasta. Alas, that is true. The ancient Romans had no pasta, but the modern Romans do, and we love it. So, this Roman dish, Cacio e Pepe, cheese and pepper. So, this is pecorino romano, as its name suggests. It was made originally from sheep's milk, sheep that graze the hills of Lazio in and around Rome. Today, the truth is, most Pecorino Romano comes from sheep on the island of Sardinia. Sardinia, I hope you all know where that is located, off the west coast of Italy, right? So, Pecorino Romano. I should add that some people, especially in the United States, like to mix in a little bit of Parmigiano Reggiano, or Parmesan, as you know, which is a slightly milder, creamier cheese. The Pecorino has a little bit of a bite. It's a little sharp. I like it very much, but if you'd like to mellow that out a little bit, you can put in a little bit of Parmesan in place of some of the Pecorino. So, we did exactly 100 grams. That's our measurement for this recipe. It happens that in my grater, which is a mouse, I confess, you don't have to use a mouse grater, but 100 grams of the grated Pecorino Romano is just over about 2 mice if you're using the mouse grater, but 100 grams. I'm then going to put it in a larger bowl, and to give us the pepe, or the pepper, you just want to have something to grind your peppercorns with. And so I'm going to grind my pepper into my cheese, and I'm going to do that just until it is sufficiently speckled. You don't want your cacio e pepe to be too hot, so we're just going to keep putting some pepper into our cheese until we have it nice and speckled throughout, to give it the cacio e pepe. All right? So I'll continue working on that, but right now we're going to turn to our dough that has been resting and missing us. So, voila, as the French would say. Here is our dough, ready to be worked. So, il mozzarella. I just learned that word. We were talking about it during the break, and that's what this is in Italian, il mozzarella, the rolling pin. And here is our little bit of dough. Now, this will make cacio e pepe a nice serving for, I would say, at least 3 people, 3 to 4 people, right? Unless it is all you're having for dinner, and then maybe not quite so many. But Italians, as you may know, tend to eat pasta as a second course, right, before the main course, which is the protein. If you're dining in Italy, sometimes they look at you a little strangely if you only order pasta. I know here we tend to treat pasta as a main course, but there it is usually a course you have before you have your chicken or your beef. All right, so we're going to take our rolling pin and we're going to begin rolling out our dough, okay? Before we do that, however, we do want to sprinkle our board with just a little bit of flour, right? So put a little flour on the board, right? Spread that out. All right. So, and now we will take our rolling pin. The purpose of the flour, of course, is so that the dough doesn't stick to our board too much. All right, so we're going to take our rolling pin like this, and we're going to begin working our dough, spreading it out. Eventually, it will begin. All right, there we go. So we continue to work our dough, and so that we try to keep it a little bit even in shape, we're going to rotate it about a quarter turn. So after we roll it a little bit, we continue to turn it just a little so that we're going to end up with it having a slightly rounder shape. And you can see even now, it is no longer curling up, but is beginning to stretch out into something that looks a little more almost pizza shaped. We're just going to keep working our dough until it is thin enough that you can almost see your hand through it. We want it to be quite thin before we go on to the next step. So I'm just going to keep rolling a little bit here until we get it a little bit thinner. So as you can see, I've been rolling away. Our dough is much, much thinner at this point. I wanted to show you one strategy that you can use. Once your dough is starting, you've been rolling and turning and rolling, trying to get it into more of a sort of pizza dough, pizza crust shape. What you can do is take the rolling pin and actually begin to roll the dough, the pasta dough, on your rolling pin. And as you do that, you can stretch it with your hands along the rolling pin as it goes, right? Like this. And once you've done that, the dough will get thinner and thinner. So it's another way to stretch it out and speed the process along. But if you were standing here with me, you could almost perceive the grain of the wooden board underneath the pasta. And if you hold it up with your hand, you can actually see my hand underneath the pasta. So this is the consistency and the thinness that you actually want before you go on to the next step. So as I mentioned, we're not going to use a pasta making machine. You can get those at places like Williams-Sonoma and others where you can actually roll out spaghetti and various things, but we're going to roll it and cut it ourselves. So what we're going to get is actually something that is like a square spaghetti, a very small square spaghetti. The Italians might call that spaghetti alla chitarra, which is like a guitar. There's a device that they use sometimes to press their pasta dough down through it, and it cuts it into very, very, very small slices with the same result that we're going to have after we've rolled our pasta and cut it with a knife. So let me show you how we do that. So I'm going to turn my board around so that I'm looking at it long ways. And I'm going to begin rolling it up into what will resemble a long cigar shape. So rolling it up. It doesn't have to be so very, very tight, but we're going to roll it up into one long cigar, our dough. Here we go. You can see it's pretty much even in shape, right? As we go, rolling up the dough into that cigar shape. All right. All right. The pasta making continues. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to take a knife. So this is a chef's knife. It does help if your knife is good and sharp when you are cutting the pasta to make the little ribbons. But of course, be extra careful anytime you're using a knife, but especially if you're using a chef's knife that is extremely sharp. So what we want to do as we go here, and I'm going to press it down a little bit as I go to make my cuts, and just a little knife technique. I hold my knuckles against the knife, keeping my fingers and tucked under and safely away, and I hold my knife like this as I go, so you can see. And maybe I'll turn it this way just a little bit so you can get a better angle of what I'm doing. And I'm going to cut these little pieces, right? And they are maybe just a millimeter thick or so, right? And as I go, I'm just cutting little pieces, little ribbons of the pasta as we go along. Being very, very careful with your knife as you go, and so forth. And we will continue doing this until all of our pasta, enough as I said, for Cacio Pepe for 3 or 4 people. All right, so I'll show you what this is going to look like, and then I will continue on. But as you can see, the little bits form into the nice square pasta, spaghetti alla chitarra. All right, so I'll continue working on that, and then we'll come back and go from there. Hello. So you can see I've been hard at work here, cutting my little ribbons You can see that I've already placed some of them over here in some flour, and I will soon be done with this. All right, we'll finish up with our ribbon making, our spaghetti alla chitarra. All right. Always being careful. Almost there. Okay, so I think this is the most fun part, where you actually get to unravel all of the little pieces. And as I said, once we've done that, we put them over here in just a little bit of a flour so that they're not sticking together. And this is what it looks like when we're all done. So we're just going to finish unraveling these little pieces in our flour, and then we're going to walk over together where I've already put on a pot, an almost full pot of water to boil. So we're going to go over there and talk for just a moment about the process of cooking the pasta. So here we are over here with our boiling water. You notice I have a nice large pot that is about 3/4 full of boiling water. Never salt your water until it is boiling, otherwise it takes longer. So I'm going to add about a tablespoon of salt to my water. We actually use the pasta water later for some seasoning, so you want it to be a little like broth, right? Not salty, not briny, but to have a little bit of flavor. So I'll put a tad more salt into my water. All right, I'm then going to take. It works a little bit like a colander, but we sometimes call it a spider. It looks a little like a spider web. I'm going to put my pasta, my fresh pasta, into the spider and lower it down into the water. I'll do a little bit and then I'll do the other part next. Okay, so that's my first part of my pasta. One thing about fresh pasta is fresh pasta cooks much more quickly than dried pasta. So all we're going to do is we're going to wait until the pasta floats up in our boiling water, and then we will be ready to go. But I'm going to take my wooden spoon right away and give it a good stir so that the noodles are not sticking together. All right? Giving that a good stir, and we're going to let it continue in the boiling water until the noodles come up. Probably no more than, say, 3-4 minutes for the fresh pasta. Okay, so my pasta has risen. We are ready to go with our pasta. You cook the pasta until it is, as they say, al dente, to the tooth, right? I like my pasta with a little bit of a bite to it so you can feel your teeth going through it. You don't want it to be overcooked or mushy. So, the next thing, I have my cheese and pepper. I'm going to put that in a mixing bowl here, all of it together. And I mentioned that I was going to use some of my pasta water. So I have about a coffee cup size of my pasta water, and I'm going to make this into a little bit of a paste with my cheese and pepper. So ladling out about a ladle full of the pasta water, and I'm going to start stirring that in to my cheese and pepper mixture. Okay, cheese and pepper, stirring vigorously with my whisk here. I'm going to add a little bit more of the pasta water to it, just to thin it out a little bit more. Okay. It's coming into a nice little paste. I don't know if you can see it, but it's making a little bit of paste. Add a little bit more water to it. You have to work rather quickly here just so that everything comes together. All right, here we are. Excellent. I think that's good. So I've continued to stir this mixture. You want it to have the consistency of cream, so it's a little bit loose, right? Okay, the pasta is ready. I've added some olive oil to my pan here, my saute pan. I'm going to put in a little bit more, just a little bit more of the olive oil to my pan, so that it doesn't stick. And I'm going to lift out my pasta with the spider. You can use a colander of any kind if you would like. So we're going to lift our pasta with the spider into the pan. And you hear it sizzle just a little bit. Put the rest of that in there. Okay. All right. Sometimes with the spider, it's a little hard to get all of the last noodles out, but there we are. Okay. Excellent. And now we are ready to mix in our sauce. And as soon as I do that, I'm going to stir like crazy with my wooden spoon. In goes the Cacio e Pepe to finish our pasta dish. Okay. And I'm going to stir over the heat in my saute pan my fresh pasta together with my Cacio e Pepe mixture that I stirred into a consistency like cream. And now what I'm trying to do is to get the Cacio e Pepe, the cheese, and the pepper evenly distributed over all of my noodles. You want to keep stirring to make sure that you don't have any clumps. Sometimes, of course, cheese can form little clumps, and you want to try to get the sauce evenly distributed over all of your noodles. So here we are, our own freshly made Cacio e Pepe, ready to serve. All you want to do to finish it off, take a little bit of the extra grated pecorino, garnish each serving of pasta with a little cheese, and if you like, you can take some very good olive oil and drizzle just a tiny bit over the top, just for a little dash of extra flavor. And there you are, from scratch, Cacio e Pepe, cooked with Magister Nifong. Mangiamo!